Welcome to the Casual Temple. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting an illuminating guest, alchemy enthusiast and antiquarian Rick Harris. Rick is the owner of Archetypal Artworks and has been a passionate book collector since his freshman year in college. Since 2011, he has been providing esoteric artwork, books, and education, focusing on categories such as alchemy, astrology, English Renaissance literature, psychology, and much, much more. With master's degrees in religion and psychology and a graduate diploma in cultural astronomy and astrology, Rick has a solid foundation for esoteric studies and acquiring fascinating books. That's not all. Rick is also the curator and creator of the very lovely alchemy deck of cards that you can use in your daily meditative practice. Rick, I'm so very happy to chat with you on the Casual Temple.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yes.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I when I reached out to you is because my husband and I saw your chat or your talk on at the Seattle Antiquarian Book Fair, and it was about the alchemical text, The 12 Keys of Basil Valentin, which already sounds like woo.
Yes.
Just by the title. Yeah, and it was really fun. I thought you were really knowledgeable, and I was like, wow, you basically have like, if I could go back in time and like redo my life, like all the things you did in your life, I'm like, I would like it to look like that. It's just so cool.
It's very
So
kind
yeah.
of you to say.
Yeah, so I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Great opportunity. And I like what you're doing with your podcast. It's
Yeah,
great.
oh, yes, thank you so much. Um, well, can you tell us a little bit about, would you call it a spiritual journey or sort of, just sort of your journey, wherever you want to start with that?
Sure. Um, and feel free to interrupt me when I get too boring.
Oh,
But I would say I've always been a seeker. And I can't think of a better word, and I know it's used and overused,
yeah.
but I think it really depicts what I've been about. So my just going back from my birthdays, I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school for 3 years, and in addition to receiving several beatings, I also received a very profound feel for the other, uh,
Mm,
for God, who for many years I thought was very angry.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but there's a lot of things, and I tell the story of my Catholic experience with the nuns, and people have actually started crying, and I'm like, "What are you crying for? This is a funny story." Like, no, you were suffering child abuse. Um, so that may be it, but I think it kind of played a part on
Mm,
everything. So as I became a teen, um, I rebelled in many ways,
yeah.
but one of them was to leave the Catholic Church, which to my father was very sacred,
Right.
although he never went or could actually tell you anything about the Catholic Church. But but it was symbolic, right? As
Yeah.
most things are. And when I hooked up with the evangelical Protestant group who, were very loving people, and it fit me. At the time, I was in Southern California, and there was a huge explosion of the Jesus rock and roll, if you will. So
Mm,
Calvary Chapel in Costa Mesa hosted it. I attended. There was Melody Land with, I'd say, all sorts of lovable whack jobs. Uh, but I dove deeply, and I believed. Hallelujah. Um, uh, by the way, I am not a professional musician at this point, but at that time, through Calvary Chapel, I met lots of contacts, lots of pros, and they really taught me a lot about music. So I ended up going to Bible school, if you will, Grace Christian University. And I really went there because I was more interested in archaeology for anything. Ended up getting a Bachelor of Theology. And, it just seemed like, well, this is where my journey is leading me. I'll just fast forward, uh, to after having been a minister for a few years and being very deeply involved with that community, having to separate from it.
Mm.
And it's not that I had to separate, but they had to separate me because faith was no longer about a belief in God or Jesus. It was a belief in God, Jesus, the inerrancy of the Bible, uh,
Mm-hmm.
the God inspired book, and some of those interpreted as the King James, which only took 1600 years after the good Lord to be printed.
Right.
Um, but through that whole experience, all I could say is I valued it. It taught me to believe in something deeply,
Mm-hmm.
even though some of it was just plain wacky. Um, but it's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I, I'm I'm fine with it. I try to stay in touch with some people. Some people will not stay in touch with me because I have veered from the Lord, whatever that means. And I swear to you, I'm not a drug addict. I don't, worship Satan. Uh, Nevertheless, I've stepped over the lines of being the
Mm.
heretic that I told you about earlier.
Right.
That's kind of my background for getting involved with things spiritual because I've really believed strongly in the other, as I call it now.
Right.
Because who is God? I don't know, right? Uh, I do believe. I don't know if believe's the right word. I love to read the Bible, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I learned Hebrew, I learned Greek, I learned Latin, and my thinking was, hey, if this is really God's word, I need to get to the source.
Right.
So while I don't believe it is a tool to club people with, uh, I believe it's a great source of inspiration. It's got pictures of our souls in there.
Yeah.
And I think if anybody wants to be literate in Western culture, or the history of Western culture, rather, you got to reckon with the Bible, or you're not going to understand works of literature. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to understand what kind of forces there were that shaped where our civilization is at now,
Yeah.
but for good or bad.
Yeah.
Um, so in any case, to tearing away from that community of faith was a killer for me. It just, I was just so conflicted. I've since gotten over that. And I realized one day it's like, well, if there is a God, I, I think there is a supreme being of some kind out there, beings, then he'll just have to show me the way, and I'll just have to do the best in my life I can.
Right.
So my next foray is into Tai Chi and Qigong. So at this crisis in my life, my first marriage is falling apart. My faith is gone. I started attending uh, these Tai Chi sessions, which I was in it for the martial arts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I got there, the our master, if you will, was more into the healing aspects of it, the qigong, the energy work.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first started, I'm like, dude, I did not sign up for this. What
Woo
are you
woo. Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
Um, as it turns out, I got completely sucked in to Chinese medicine,
Mm.
and did the same thing I do with everything. I dive deeply and I go to the bottom. If I have questions, I will get answers. Or if there are no answers, at least realize there's nowhere else I can get answers.
Mm.
Uh, so when I dove into this, reading about the history, about the use, about the functions, um, a few years later, I decided I was going to go back to school because I wanted to study Jungian uh, psychology.
Yeah.
And my first thought was I'd love to go back to Switzerland and join the Jung Institute. And at the time, I discovered you had to have $180,000 in the bank. Well, I didn't
Wow.
have that, just so you
Right.
know. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and all these other requirements in order to attend there. It was like, well, all right, that ain't happening. And some people introduced me to Pacifica Graduate Institute down in Santa Barbara,
Mm.
which is a fantastic school. Highly recommend it. Um, anyway, there's things about that anybody listening will know. It's a school designed to train therapists, but it's also designed to train mythologists, to study deep into the depth psychologies, Freud, Jung, the masters.
Mm.
So anyway, I went there. I went for a therapeutic degree, not not really wanting to be a therapist, but it was the closest degree and the schedule fit my time. My employer paid for me to fly down there once a month to Santa Barbara to do this.
Wow.
So it was while I was at Pacifica that I was introduced to Western alchemy. And as I was introduced to it, I'm like, wait a minute, this is just like Chinese medicine.
Mm.
This is trying to, as the Chinese tried to do, discover the elixir of life. They also looked at transmutation of metals, how to make gold, how to make silver.
Right.
It was just a mind blower for me uh, to see the similarities between the two. Uh, Carl Jung was very deep into alchemy. As a matter of
Mm.
fact, I would say he was the foremost authority on alchemy, the early 20th century. I don't know anybody else who dove that deeply. And Jung believed alchemy was a metaphor for the development of the soul. And in Jung's development of psychology, the goal of healing or growth was the process that he called individuation.
Mm-hmm.
And he believed that corresponded perfectly with uh, the alchemists reaching the pinnacle of gold in their transmutation of metals, or in the spiritual gold, if you will,
Right.
of alchemy. So this is long-winded. I apologize for it, but it's kind of my development,
Mm-hmm.
how I got kind of to where I was. Incidentally, I spent 3 years at Pacifica, got my degree, spent a year in private practice, and then had to get out. As I discovered, going from a six-figure job into therapy, you can expect to make about $5 an hour
Boy.
with a master's degree.
Right.
Not only did I not appreciate that, nor did my wife or child. So anyway, my hat's off to therapists. There's lots of fantastic ones, especially here in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
So people that do the Jungian work, which I think is the most valuable. It's not the only valuable. There's lots of great therapies out there, but
Yeah.
the Jungian for me is the greatest because it is about tending to the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if I could recapture my life, it's about trying to get that meaning in my life, try to get to what my soul is calling for.
Mm.
Because I really believe that's where we are headed, or we should be headed, I should say.
Yeah.
I have opportunity to give youngins advice all the time, and I'm like, you want a job that makes you happy, you want to be happy, forget about it. You you will never
That's
have that.
true.
It does not exist. But if you say, I want to have meaning in my life, I want to have purpose, I have things inside me that just need to grow and develop.
Yeah.
Now you're on to something, I believe, which is very purposeful and will be meaningful, right? And
Yeah.
I've just had a lot of experience interacting with other people, those that have gone down the drugs, or whatever you can imagine is not a good road.
Hmm.
Typically, at the very base of it, they just are directionless. They
Yeah.
don't know where to go. Now, I may have gone down some bad roads in the past. Actually, I maybe did once or twice, but we won't talk about that. But in in it, I think I stayed off of the really bad roads primarily because of those damn nuns and my parents just being so strict, so that
Mm.
I was the kind of Catholic that even if you sinned, I felt guilty, like it was somehow my fault.
Right.
So, but it contained me, I think, from
Mm.
really going off the deep edge. But like I say, at the base of it was a soul that wanted to be tended. So I say specifically in my adult life, it's tending to the soul. That is the most important thing.
Mm.
Alchemy is the ultimate metaphor for tending to the soul, my
Right.
opinion.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'll take a breath now.
Wow. Yes. Oh, there's always these things I try to like, oh yeah, this I wanted to mention so many things. One of the things was something about because I just to share a little bit about myself in connection with what you said. My dad was Irish Catholic, American Irish Catholic. My mother Filipino or Filipina, so also Catholic when I was a kid. However,
Sorry.
um, it was a sort of Catholic, right? We only went to church on like Easter and Christmas, that kind of thing.
Typical American Catholic. Yep.
Typical American Catholic. But I will say that I'm very grateful for that experience. And, my dad later on, he did go to some like fundamentalist Christian churches, which was fun for me. But it, I do appreciate it because it did give me that perspective of like, there is something out there. All these people, uh, at least they think or they believe that there is something more than like what we're doing on this plane in this reality. And that always fascinated me as a kid. Um, Even so much, and I was a very precocious kid. I read a lot. When I mentioned this a few times on the podcast, but I read the Bible several times when I was like 10 years old, like several times. I loved it. I loved reading it. Of course, I liked Genesis is like gorgeous, and then like all the Jesus stuff, right? Is all my favorite. Like Genesis and the Jesus stuff is amazing. Um, but yeah, you're right. Even the stuff that isn't, perfect, like Genesis or the words of Jesus, it's like there is as an adult, you do find things in there that's like kind of blows you away if you go back and kind of read some stuff. Like there's some interesting things in here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think of, I said I'm a seeker.
Yeah.
I think of, Jesus' words,
Yeah.
seek and you shall find.
Yes.
Knock and the door will be opened. Ask and it will be get right. I mean, it's so fundamental. But it's a universal truth, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely the idea around, like you said, like this, I love how you put it because I didn't even think of that way, is like just finding your soul or like seeking communion with your soul is really the goal of life. And, in my particular practice, which is more like Hermeticism and the Western ceremonial tradition, is, your true will, right? What is your true
Mhm.
will is kind of thing, which is, you could really just say is your soul, like in sort of what you were um, kind of aligning with. Because I was like, oh yeah, it's so beautiful. Oh my. Let's see. So I think that's what those were the things I wanted to mention. What you said, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so in your uh, journey, did you have any particular support or guidance? I know you definitely went to a lot of schooling and teachers, but was there anybody in
Yes.
particular?
There are probably more than I could mention here, but
Yeah.
one of the big standouts for me was at Grace University. There was a professor, a fundamentalist professor, Dr. Dale DeWitt, who really taught me how to think critically.
Mm,
And it sounds ironic, um, that a religious environment, a religious teacher who should, be following, what he's supposed to be following, would teach us to think more freely.
mm,
Um, and one of the, uh, and by the way, I love the guy, just loved him, and he his loving me, I think, was a transformation as
yeah.
well. But ended up finishing up a master's degree at SPU, and I wrote my thesis basically on. This is not very professional or religious sounding, but the bullshit of believing there's an inerrancy to the Bible or there's a sola scriptura. We only follow the Bible.
Mm,
So I wrote that thesis mainly with the theory in mind to debunk the notion that you have to believe in an inerrant Bible in order to have a coherent faith. And I used, the religious group I was part of, kind of as fodder for my whole shtick there. And I sent him a copy of the thesis, and I thought, well, I mean, they've already sort of cut me off anyway. We'll see what goes. But he wrote back some very nice words, and he said, "You did a really great job here. Here's
hmm,
where I, disagree with you, but otherwise, well done." And that just kind of blew me away
yeah.
because within religious communities, and it's not just evangelicalism.
Right.
Uh, by the way, I had a professor at SPU, Frank Spina, who had a quote, and I'd love to say it was my own, but it was his. And people would say, "What's the difference between an evangelical and a fundamentalist?" He says, "Well, an evangelical is a fundamentalist with good manners." So essentially, they have kind of the same, roots, if you will,
Right.
but are supposed to have good manners. I don't know that modern evangelicals are still following the good manner thing, but yeah, whatever. Uh, in any case, that was a therapeutic experience for me to produce that thesis. Um, and I got to say, when I did my bachelor's degree, did my first master's degree, I had this notion that once I get these degrees, guess what? I'm there. I'm
Right.
the master.
Right.
And
Yeah.
uh, and I just remember feeling empty. You know, I mean, thrilled that I accomplished something, but
Yeah.
it was still an emptiness. Like, damn it, I'm still as dumb as I was before this. Maybe a little more knowledge.
Right.
Um, but, and I've told, again, many of my mentees, it's like, I wanted to be the wise master. That was
Yeah.
my goal in life. I was going to be the wise master. And I said, there's a couple things wrong with that. I said, first of all, when I share my wisdom with a lot of young people, children included, they're just like, whatever, old man.
You're right.
Right? They don't want to hear it. But
Yeah.
I got it. I've got the secrets of the universe, and you don't even want it. Uh, the other thing is, after a lot of years of study, right? Um, I don't feel like I know enough.
Hmm.
Now, in interacting with other people, I know more than most,
Right.
but it's not enough. And I don't know that it ever will be enough. I mean, particularly when the history of the world keeps changing. I mean, archaeology keeps turning things up that reshape how we thought about the past,
Hmm.
or how we were forced to believe in a past.
That's right.
So, anyway, uh, we may not be able to say that I am wise and all knowing, but we can say that I'm now old. So there you go. And whereas in my younger days, you would want to argue with me, I'd I'd take it on. I'd fight full force. Right
Right.
now, somebody says, "Yeah, well that seems like a dumb idea." I just have to say, you may be right. Um, it's just I don't know. It's just the years just give you a different perspective on things.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Oh, wait, I'm trying to think of yeah, when you were talking about just sort of, oh yes, I'm going to be the master, I'm going to be this. Um, definitely when you start on any of these sort of paths, like me included, I'm like, oh yes, at least in the Western ceremonial tradition, you're like, oh yes, I'm going to get in contact with my holy guardian angel. That's like check. I'm going to proceed to go through and cross the abyss. Check. I'm going to like, like check, check, check.
Yes,
And then as you do this, you're just kind of like, why am I doing that? Like, why am I doing that? Because I want some sort of validation. Like, oh, I like in your case, you're like, I'm going to get all these degrees. I'm going to know everything. I'm going to be so wise. I'm going to be able to share all this beautiful information with people and it's going to help them. Right.
right.
But yeah, you're like, wait a minute. I think it's the I that really wants these things. Right.
Yeah,
Um, so
yes,
I love your perspective of like, you share the wisdom, kids don't really care about it. And then now, but I'm sure, deep in the future, they're gonna think back on it and be like, you know what, I think Rick had something there.
right. Yeah.
Um,
After I'm dead,
right. Right. Hopefully before that, they can ask you more questions. Um, but yeah, that and yeah, this is just so great. I love that perspective on things.
Well,
Um,
I remember my Tai Chi master, right? And
mhm.
there's many people in town who know Dr. Wong. They know who I'm talking about. Um, but he was a guy that had a lot of great influence on me. Um, and I remember one of the things uh, that we learned was it's called I think 7-star boxing. I'm not even sure I could do it today, but at the time I got very good at it. And it's a series of punches and blocks, and you do it with another person, and you
Mhm.
move around in the Bagua circle. And it's super woo woo stuff. I mean, I
Right.
loved it. I absolutely loved it. So one day I'm the more senior student, and we're in class time, and Dr. Wong picks me to do the 7-star boxing. So I get up there, and I'm doing good. I mean, I was the master. I was like punching and blocking. It was just beautiful, and we're moving and doing all the steps. And in my mind, I'm like, I am really awesome. So
Yes.
as I'm being really awesome, I feel these little taps come up and go in between our
Oh,
boxing. He slapped
right.
my face. And it's like, how is he doing that?
That's amazing.
How is
Yeah.
he doing that? And anyway, I just started laughing because it was like, okay, yes, master, I get it. I'm not the master. I got you. But it again at the time it didn't matter for me that I wasn't the master.
Yeah.
It was more a just kind of pat on the back. Keep yourself humble, you know. Yeah,
Hmm.
do well at some things, but someone's always going to be better. And this is the guy. Incidentally, I think that session ended up, I was on my back and out of breath
Right.
and flung on the ground. Uh, but yeah, Dr. Wong was one of those guys that helped heal me when I needed healing that I didn't even know that I needed,
Right. Yeah.
and took me to just to some amazing places. One of which was and stop me anytime here, Marilee.
Mm-mm. Okay, please,
Um,
please.
I'll tell you a very significant experience. We're sitting in class when we were doing Tibetan meditation, and while we're doing it, I entered into what I can only describe as either a hallucination, a dream state, a vision, who knows,
Right.
right? But in there, I was descending, and it was like almost like not a telephone pole, a totem pole. Yeah, that sounds better than a telephone pole. And I was seeing these images of Native Americans, of Vikings, of Mayans, just all of these civilizations. And then I like popped back into the class, and I looked around and I was just embarrassed. I'm like, oh my God, I just fell asleep, had a dream for like a half hour.
Right.
As it turns out, it was only a couple minutes, and nobody even noticed that
Right.
I was having this cosmic experience. So I don't know how many years later, it was 2 or 3 years later, when I first went to visit Pacifica. It was late at night, it's foggy, and I'm driving there, but I come on the grounds, and out in front of the campus is a modern totem pole with Native Americans, Vikings, all of these civilizations that I
Wow.
had experienced in that trance dream hallucination, wackiness, whatever you want to call it. I mean,
Yeah.
it happened, and it was
Wow.
amazing. So when I got there and I saw that, it was like, all right, I'm on the right road.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what it means, but I'm on the right road.
Yeah.
But Dr. Wong was a pathway for me,
Hmm.
to get there. And he those of you who know him, he's sometimes difficult to understand. His Chinese is very strong, and English sometimes not so good. Uh, but when you spend time with him, you get to learn to know what he's saying. Sometimes
Mm.
he doesn't say anything. He just expects you're gonna do it.
Oh,
You're gonna go do what he needs you to do. He's a really interesting guy. You ask him, or I asked him, early on, because when I'm sorting things and trying to figure things out, I just ask dumb questions. Like, so Dr. Wong, are you a Buddhist or a Taoist? He's like, yes. Uh, but but I thought I heard you say you were a Christian. Yes, right. So I'm going through these religions, all I can think of. And his point was he believes that all religions or spiritual forces again should be leading to the same thing.
Hmm.
But at the time it was hard. I mean, especially those who have been in a fundamentalists with good manner group, things are kind of black and white, right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of gray. So to hear this guy say he was part of all that, it was kind of like, wow, I got to think about that.
Yeah.
So and by the way, I think I could answer what he answered at that time to me. Those would be my answers,
Hmm.
right? I don't dislike fundamentalists, Mormons, whatever the group, you put the tag on it. I see everybody's religious, whatever values have errors and flaws. And it's like, keep, keep pushing towards the development of your soul
Hmm.
in a non uh, greedy way. And you're going to develop, you're going to, whatever it is.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, all right. Rabbit
Wow.
hole number 7. Sorry about that.
Well, I like that the story about Dr. Wong and you learning the martial arts. Was it Qigong and Tai Chi?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Tai Chi is the art form.
Hmm.
Qigong is the medicinal.
Right.
But in reality, it's all part
This,
of one unit,
right. That makes sense.
or in the traditional Chinese way, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that because tying to something you said previously about I think it was Jung and sort of I think the archetypes or the mythologies, like I think that's where people can go sort of on to start those journeys.
Yeah.
I think people need them. I think everybody needs those because it seems like when you're kind of this lonely soul, this lonely human, it's nice to hear stories of people accomplishing things in a grand way and tie that to sort of your own individual life. And then that can open up uh, the different paths that you as an individual want to go down. And I think it's right, like all these different religions, all these different spiritual practices, whatever you want to call them. I think, yeah, there's definitely some truth in there that is works for somebody.
Yeah.
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 So I think those are great things to consider for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, when again, using Jung as
mhm.
my platform or whatever, Jung believed that there were archetypes, right? There were
Yeah.
these values in the human soup, if you will, and they
Right.
came and went with each one of us, but they were recognizable, and um, they're valuable.
Hmm.
So if you go just in the history of literature that we know of today, right? Whether it's Gilgamesh or the Iliad and the Odyssey, Virgil's Aeneid, which was the Roman version of the Odyssey, uh, Dante's Inferno, all of these books, Milton's Paradise Lost. I mean, the stories in alchemy, the development of alchemy, it all comes back to some of the fundamental same things.
Hmm.
What is the meaning of your life?
Right.
How do you determine what the meaning is? And sometimes the meaning is you don't know what the meaning is. You just keep going. And you
Yeah.
run into cyclops along the way, and you run into, the sirens that don't want to let you pass. You run into people that want to kill you. And it's all part of your development.
Hmm.
Even though these are horrible things, which I wish upon nobody.
Right.
Everybody I've talked to has, through these horrible things, come up with amazing gifts, the gifts from the gods. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want any more gifts. I really don't. But
What up, gifts?
they still seem to come. But
Right.
but but that's, kind of, the real difference, I think, between humans and primates,
Mm.
which, as time goes on, I think there's a very thin line there between us. I mean,
Yeah.
we are literally, we're animals. We are animals. You say, oh no, Rick, we're developed and, we're scientific and we got, chat GPT and deep seek and, we're on the edge. We are animals. And here's how you know we're animals. Everything we do is tied to emotions. The
Yes.
murders that we commit, the, sexual issues that happen, these are all base primal values. And the
Right.
only thing that keeps us going is to have some kind of rock, some kind of meaning and purpose
Mm.
to our life that can get us past it to something higher.
Yeah.
And that to me is unbelievable. It's unbelievable that we get to experience that.
Hmm.
When we're going through the hard times, it's not unbelievable. It's
Right.
pissing me off. Yes.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
it really is, something of great value. And I don't know if I mentioned this when we talked about alchemy before, but basically my belief in humankind is we're all, we'll just say, fudged up. Um, and we are, and it's because we're all flawed. And where we get into problems within society is when I think I'm better than you, or you think you're better than me. But the fact is, we're all a hair away from being apes. I know that's disturbing to some people, but
Yeah.
it is the truth. I mean, the amount of slaughter that goes on today in this world, slaughter, absolute slaughter,
Hmm.
hundreds of thousands of people every year being slaughtered.
Hmm.
Our children are being trafficked
Yeah.
every year. The United States is right in the middle of that. Um, it is
Yeah.
not a pure, kind world. It's evil.
Yeah.
There's a lot of evil there, and it's because people are operating based on prime values instead of meaningful, uh, values. In my opinion, meaningful values.
Right.
We should be looking at, how do we develop our soul? How do we develop our society? What can we do for the future generations?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, well said. I like thinking about how we're just this much away from being, or are we are primates essentially, but and then it made me think of like, which is really goofy. I watch a lot of Instagram reels, right, with a lot of animals. I love animals, are wonderful. But you watch animals and you're like, even just like a bird, right? Which you think, oh, a bird, but they have such personality to them, you know? And so it's like there isn't really that much of it to, like, they, or your cat or your dog, like, or even a primate, they have like these personalities. So how much different are we really? I don't know.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Um, and maybe it's our mind that is causing, like, all, like you said, we were slaughtering. Why are we doing this? We're slaughtering all these people. It doesn't make any sense. At least with animals, you feel like, yeah, with an animal, they're like, you're in my territory, you know, like, we're gonna
Yes.
have to take care of you or whatever. But yeah, we just making yourself better than the other person seems to be sort of the crux of the issue here.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well,
Yeah.
to tie into, alchemy, if you will,
Yeah.
right? This is where I think, during the periods we call the Renaissance, right? The Italian, the English, the European Renaissance. This is where people really got reflective and they
Mm,
really wanted to be better human beings.
right.
And so for me, alchemy was just one of those ways that a lot of people utilized to become better human beings, was using that metaphor. Um, now, there were lots of greedy ones who wanted gold.
Right.
And, I think I talked about Rudolph of Hungary, right?
Hmm.
Uh, Rudolph II. He hired hundreds of alchemists, and some of them he just locked up, right? You work on producing gold, you work on producing the medicinal elixirs, and you guys come up, with the not the tree of life, but the fountain of life,
Mm,
right?
hmm.
So, but the really wise ones knew that it was a higher purpose that they were going towards. Incidentally, that reminds me of when I was reading about the Chinese alchemy. They didn't call it that, by the way. I don't
Right.
know, Chinese alchemy. Um, as they were trying to develop the uh, there's a word for it, and I can't think of it. It's like the river of life, the inner life. It's about an eternal elixir that will let
Mm,
you live forever,
wow.
eternal youth. Uh, they did a lot of experimenting, right? And mercury, as in Western alchemy, also in Chinese uh, medicine, mercury was like super fascinating, and they experimented the heck with out of it. And I remember reading about a lot of Chinese prisoners died during the experimental phases of
Ooh,
this, realizing that well, maybe mercury isn't that eternal life thing.
right.
Yeah, because it killed people. Anyway,
Yeah.
uh, part of human development.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. An unfortunate part of human development. How about we go forward and not do those things?
Yes,
Oh boy. Um,
exactly.
so I did want to talk about books. One of the books that came to mind as you were talking about sort of finding meaning in your life is I'm sure you've heard of it and you may have read of it or read it is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which is an amazing book. It's
Yes,
essentially that. It's, in the if folks don't know, Viktor Frankl, I believe he was involved in the Holocaust in the camps, but
yes,
he was basically like, how do you find meaning even in this horrific circumstance? What do you do?
yes,
Um, and then it made me also think about like how I'm always jealous of hearing stories of like, because I love music and hearing musicians like, oh yes, I was 6 years old and I happened to see a guitar in the window and my mom bought it for me and therefore I am a musician forever. I'm like, dang, that must have been awesome to like know immediately what you were going to do. I'm so jealous of that. But yeah, I think for to find your own meaning, it isn't always that easy or that at least that clear. Um, and so that is basically it. Like you said, of like Jesus's quote is "Seek and you shall find." I think it's just seek. The seeking is the important piece of that, not necessarily the finding,
yes.
but the seeking. Um, so in saying that, because I mentioned a book, were there some pivotal books that you would recommend to some folks to expand their mind?
If somebody gets through Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, that's hard to top. But that is a brilliant book.
Yeah.
You bring out a really great one. Um, I have to narrow down in my mind books
Yeah.
because sometimes I don't know if you've ever had this. You read a book, it's like really inspires you, and you go and share it, and people are like, huh, right,
Yes,
whatever.
exactly.
Um,
Yep. Yep.
and in my case, I've read voraciously all my life. And I often find that I'll pick up a book and afterwards or in the middle of it, it's like, wait, I've already read this book. Uh,
I love hate when I do that.
yeah, my the computer up here gets a little jammed up at times.
Yep.
Um, Somebody recently asked me, and I have recommended this in the therapeutic setting as well.
Mm.
Um, what's a good book to read while I'm going through this?
Mm.
And one of them is Lord of the Rings. And for me, honestly, I get more excited watching the Peter Jackson films. But for those that like to read, and then we'll talk about, okay, Frodo's got this ring, he's got to get it to Mordor, and look at all the trips and traps that he has to go through,
Right.
right? And so the point of my story is, instead of reading that literally, start to think about it metaphorically, right? What does that really mean? Does
Mm-hmm.
in your life, do you ever run across things that you hadn't planned on or you didn't like? I mean, I think that's all of us, right?
Right. Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's just uh, a way to help people think differently about life.
Mm.
Because once you start to think about your own life metaphorically,
Yes.
then and I'll talk about mythopoetic thoughts in a minute,
Mm-hmm.
you start to understand. So when you're in the office and you've got somebody you're working with, you just can't stand them. They're backstabbing, conniving, whatever they are, right?
Yeah.
That's you know that's the evil guy.
Yep.
That's the evil person in your story.
Sauron.
So
Yeah.
yeah, Sauron. So how do you get past that?
Yeah.
Right. And for most people, the hard part is, well, how do I get past that?
Mm.
And for me, I just tell them, step back, you know, look at it like it's a story. Look at it like it's happening to someone else. What would you
Mm.
recommend? Often people have the solutions for themselves right inside, but they're afraid to reach out, or
Mm.
they've never tried or never been challenged to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, Another series of books that I highly recommend, and some people think I'm a complete dork for this, but that's okay. We've we've already established you can call me about whatever name, and I'm just not going to get excited about it. The Tony Hillerman little novels
Oh.
about the Dene, uh, their Dene stories, Navajo, that take place down in the Southwest. And he's got native police chief,
All right. Is that
native.
the Black Winds or something that show is based off of? Dark
Yes,
Winds?
yes,
Yes. Okay.
Dark
Dark
Winds.
Winds.
Yes, was
Yes.
was based off that. Um, Tony Hillerman's novels to me are a religion. As a matter of fact, I've thought
Mhm.
of maybe just one of the communities here getting people together just to talk about some of the Hillerman novels because he approaches the native religion, which I hesitate to use that word because
Right.
they don't use that word. It's just their way of life, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
it is a way rich in meaning and culture and just so deep. For me as a non-native, I've found so much comfort in Hillerman, just seeing things through his eyes,
Mm.
seeing things the way that are right. And
Yeah.
so, for example, we Westerners, we like to idealize the natives, like, oh, well, if we
Right.
have, this kind of curing session, it's going to be taken care of. Well, as you read these novels, you find out there's not a lot of black and white. There is some black and white, but it's not always about black and white. It's about
Mm,
the same people coming for healing that were that are bad, right?
right.
They're murderers, maybe they're killers, maybe they're thieves, but they're coming back for a ceremony that they know they need, right? It's
Hmm.
that the soul again calling out. You may go down some dark roads, but your soul's telling you you need this, or you need to go back to this.
Right.
So uh yeah. Anyway, um I go down rabbit holes, I apologize. But yes. So Tolkien, Hillerman, C.S. Lewis. I had a teacher who wrote her PhD on the Chronicles of Narnia and some kind of teaching method for children.
Right.
And she was one of the most fascinating teachers I ever had. But all those books, they contain these archetypal values that we're looking for,
Hmm.
showing how people in different settings are achieving those archetypal values. And it's messy. I
Yeah.
mean, it is not a clear path. Um,
Yeah.
I remember, I'm sure you're familiar with the late Ram Dass, uh, but a friend of mine was just enthralled with him. And I'm like, yeah, well, whatever. Just go away, you Krishna crazy. Um, and I heard Ram Dass say something one time that said, "You think you're enlightened? Why don't you go to visit your family of origin for a week?" Right? And it was like, wow,
It's
wow.
so true.
I mean,
Push those buttons.
I know, and it was like,
Yeah.
guilty,
Yeah.
guilty. But
Oh,
that's our nature. We're trying to make ourselves better. We're trying to get out of it. We're trying to get out of the mud, and
yeah.
a certain part we're just never getting out of.
Hmm.
Can we rise above it? Yes.
Yeah.
Are we going to be free of it? Yeah, probably not.
Right.
Probably
Those hooks are deep, I think, for sure.
not.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, no,
I'm
no.
just books are just going through my
I, I
mind.
I
But
know. There's so I love that you are recommending what like fiction books. Because I, especially since we were talking about archetypes and stuff, those are such great recommendations. Probably surprising since we're talking about alchemy that people were like, oh, interesting that he's recommending those.
yeah,
Um, and I like that I've seen the Dark Wind series. I have not read Hillerman, but now you've piqued my interest. And then you describing sort of like these bad people, like going to it sounded like they go to the community to get healing, and right, like it's
yeah,
normal. And then I'm sure the healers are like, sure, man, you definitely need some healing. Let's do this.
right,
Whereas like that's not how we treat things as in the Western, especially in America. We don't do that. We just put you away and get you away
yeah,
from everybody.
yes.
Yeah. So that's fascinating. I like that thinking about that. So now you definitely piqued my interest about reading those novels.
Well, a lot of the Jungian followers, folks that started Pacifica, taught their whatever, right? Uh, they talk a lot about mythopoeic thinking,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
And um, and that simply is thinking in a mythological sort of setting, pulling on those archetypes from stories we know,
Right.
and the poetic, the poetry of being able to receive information, which is done so brilliantly through novels. Herman Hesse is another one, brilliant, just unbelievably brilliant. but I digress. So this mythopoetic thinking is something that I think we need to return to more of it in our
Mm,
culture, especially,
yeah.
especially in terms of technology,
Right.
right? I mean, right now the technology giants rule the world.
Yeah.
I'm only just happy I bought some of their stock a long time ago. Not enough to fully
Right.
get out of everything, but uh, but this notion that science or data and facts are going to save us. Well, if there's one thing we know, that is we do have one Bible, but many interpretations, right?
Right. Yes.
So if that's your data set, it's flawed.
Right.
It's not clear.
Yeah.
Then if you want to try to define things scientifically, you could describe things. You could describe emotions. You could describe, you know, what you think God is or
Hmm.
why your mind thinks there's a God, but it doesn't really answer anything.
Right.
And I'm not putting down science at all. I'm a big believer in science. Bring it on. I mean, hey, if you could prove something, let's do it.
Yeah.
But the fact is, it goes back to we're animals. Hello. What
Yes.
speaks to our soul are those archetypal images, those archetypal values, are that poetic kind of thinking. So that when you want to read Genesis, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It isn't a science lesson on how God put together
Right.
the world.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, the world was created with meaning and purpose.
Hmm.
And but unfortunately, the fundamentalists still want to argue about what that purpose is. But they're missing it. They're
Yeah.
absolutely missing the mythopoetic value. And as a therapist, I see that when people get on the mythopoetic level, it's much easier for them to be able to heal. I mean, you take a look at children who don't have the wherewithal, the data set, the communication levels to tell you what's going on with them. By the way, I did my internship with a children's clinic in Port Townsend, Jumpy Mouse Children's Center. Plus, for them, they're God's work in
Oh,
Port Townsend. Let me tell you. Uh, but anyway, children can come in and you know they have these issues, and we parents, when our children have problems, we sit them down and say, okay, what's wrong?
right.
Spill it, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times the kids don't know what's wrong,
Yeah.
right? But we do know that when parents are having issues or problems, kids are going to do typically one of two things, or sometimes both. They're going to have stomach pain and they're going to have new allergies.
Oh,
Now, isn't that
that's
interesting?
fascinating. Yeah.
But our way to get at solving the problems is, well, we got to do this scientifically, right?
Right.
You
Hmm.
give me the symptoms, you tell me what the things are. Or people come to the therapist, right?
Hmm.
All right, I got this problem. I need a prescription, right? Can you write me something, doc? It's like, no, that's not
Right.
how this works. This works because we are those animals. Okay, I'll even say we're evolved animals, but our soul needs to be talked to in certain ways.
Yes.
And for
Yeah.
me, the mythopoetic is there. For me, alchemy is the ultimate metaphor for how the soul operates.
Right. Yeah.
So
Oh, I like the term mythic poetic.
mythopoetic,
Poetic
yes.
is such a cool term, and I mentioned this literally on the last episode I recorded, but So I'm trying to look into my sort of the Filipino pre-colonial, what were we doing pre Spain?
Right.
Um, and one of the books that I've read recently is this one called Way of the Ancient Healer by Virgil Mayor Apostol, written recently. He's, alive and well and very healthy. One of the things he said that like I can't stop thinking about was one of the when a healer, a lot of times the healer in the Philippines, before they would even start the healing on a person, they would tell them a story. They would tell them a story of a mythic person, or not even a mythic person. They would just tell them a wonderful, beautiful story about how somebody went and sought this particular type of healing and then they got healed. So they would hear the story first, and then the healer would start doing their thing on their healing method on it.
Right.
And so the way it was explained was like it set the person up psychologically, mentally, emotionally to receive the healing, right? And like, hey, maybe I can actually heal because this
Mm,
character in the story healed.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, what? That's so fascinating. So when you were talking about that, it was like, yeah, like kids, especially kids are so tied to that archetypal story life, makes sense that that's the prescription
Yes.
in a lot of ways.
Well, I think of, and I may butcher this story. My apologies. But I remember reading about Albert Schweitzer,
Mm,
the great polymath who worked in Africa uh, as a doctor for a while. And there would be people would come to see him, and some people he'd see, others he'd send to the shaman.
mm,
And some visitors were there, and they're of course incensed. It's like, you are the ultimate doctor. Why aren't you seeing these people? Why are you sending them to the shaman? And he said, because there are some things that could only be healed with medicine,
right.
but most of these things can be healed through the mind, and that is the function of the shaman.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think a lot of our Western medicine clinics, if you will, are starting to get this,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But a lot of them still aren't, right? You come in with blood pressure, you're getting a medicine to go.
Yes.
And you know what? I'm the guiltiest. I've got a malady. I want it gone now.
Right. Right. Exactly. That's how we're taught, though. So it's
Oh, totally,
got to get
totally.
taken care of.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, and it's also making me think of like when I was a child, I had because you were talking about sort of the children's clinic that you're talking about. So I had like horrible ulcers, like stomach ulcers, and it was definitely based around. It wasn't like the food I was eating or anything like. It was definitely like the stuff that was going on, like or in my family at the time was
Yeah.
causing those ulcers. I don't have them anymore, thank God. They did
Right.
finally clear up somehow. I bet now that we're talking about reading books, I loved reading books, so I'm wondering if that, sort of helped heal the ulcers on their own, because it was definitely not going to the doctor or any of that stuff. It was not any of that because um that's
I
fascinating.
boy, I haven't thought about this for a long time, but I was 13 or 14. I had stomach problems, and I was taken to multiple doctors. And I remember the last doctor I went to said, "There's nothing wrong with you, kid. Why are you wasting our time?" Right.
Great.
Well, here I'm the oldest of seven kids. My father, God bless his soul, is an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
And when he would get drunk, the demons would rage.
Right. Yep.
And you know, that that really messed with my mind.
Yeah.
But at the time, my parents were totally like, "Oh, this is a physical thing. You just, you gotta." We got to go to the doctor. They're going to
Right.
fix it. And then, of course, to go to the doctor and they're just complete assholes.
Right.
That,
Oh
that's
yeah.
not helpful either, right?
Yeah, I know.
Uh, but, but I didn't think about that till years later. It was like, oh, remember you had those stomach things? Like,
Yeah.
I didn't have stomach things. I had parents who were fudged up.
Yep.
And by the way, for everybody who's going to want to defend parents,
Yeah.
uh, I loved my parents. They're both gone now.
Mhm.
Loved them, and I have no regrets. Did they screw some things up? You better believe it.
Yeah.
Uh, but me being a parent, I have come to learn that I can also screw things up,
Right.
just in different ways.
Yes.
So I totally get that. There's
Yeah.
no. My father and I made our peace long ago, and I value it. I value him. It was his journey, right? I mean,
Yeah.
part of his journey. And kids seeing that parents have demons, that is scary.
Oh
That
yeah.
is super scary for kids. So, and then you become an adult. You think, well, I'm an adult. I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to have my own demons. Guess what?
Nope.
Surprise!
Yep.
You got your own demons.
Got your own demons to wrestle with for
But,
sure.
but I really believe, like I said, thinking differently, mythopoetically, uh, as unconditional love as you can have to give it to other people. Um, well, one of my former, uh, actually, I didn't really have him for a professor. He taught at Pacifica. He taught at the Jung Institute. He was actually the director of the Jung
Wow.
Institute in Switzerland. Um, uh, Funny story, I really idolized this guy. And I had lunch with him twice at Pacifica. And when I was there, it was like my tongue was absolutely tied. I didn't even know what to say. You know, it was ridiculous. Anyway, he's now deceased. Bad for the world. The light, a
Yeah.
light's gone out. But he would often criticize psychotherapy for thinking they that psychotherapy had some kind of scientific model that could
Mm,
fix people.
right.
And he's like, hey, how about just like, try some good old fashioned social gathering or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Things that are not lay on the couch, tell me your problems, give me your dreams, and I'll interpret them. Well,
Mm.
I do love dreams. We could
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about that on another issue.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, definitely. That's fascinating. More like it sounded like maybe, you as the psychotherapist aren't the one, I don't know, like the one that's going to figure it out and heal. It's more like get the person into the community, sounds like, right? Like get them around people or like interacting with others is
Uh,
maybe
yeah, to get them to be more human,
to be more human.
right?
Yes.
And that would include reading things. By the way, movies are legit with me. If you don't want to read the book and they made a movie, hey,
Do it. Yeah.
all for it. Um, yeah, I was going to say something about Harry Potter, but I won't. Though I love the Harry Potter stuff. Incidentally, uh, I have just had great opportunities to study magic and alchemy and astrology from the earliest times till
Yeah.
now. And I can tell you that J.K. Rowling is a virtual expert on who actual real life magicians were and
Hmm.
alchemists. And she
Interesting.
weaves them throughout her books. And I didn't realize this because, I just saw the movies and then my
Right.
wife and daughter would both voraciously eat these things up. So one day I just sat and I started going through a Harry Potter book. I'm like, Nicholas Flamel, wait a minute, that was a real guy,
Wow.
right? And you start seeing this stuff. Not the least of which is the Philosopher's Stone,
Right. Yeah.
which is completely based in alchemy, right?
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
the source. So, Rowling, I know there's been a lot of controversy around some of her statements.
Yeah.
I honestly haven't followed them. I don't know what they are. Without knowing any of that, I could tell you she's at least an authority on magic and and alchemy. She is.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. See all the things I've learned so far. Um, oh gosh, I did want to talk about because I like I mentioned to you, I got your alchemy deck, which I have it's in here somewhere.
Yeah,
Um, but like why did you decide to put them together? And then would you want to share any sort of illuminations that, came about from you using them yourself? I can, yeah. Anyway, I'll start there.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, to start with, I am an image person, right? Images speak to me,
Hmm.
whether that's dreams, art, whatever. That's me. So when I was in the middle of my alchemy deep dive, um, I came across some amazing alchemical texts that had these retorts. For those who may not know what a retort is, they look like the vases that the alchemists have in their laboratory, basically glass beakers, bottles, retorts, alembics, and in each of these bottles, if you will, there's different stages of what's known as the alchemical process.
Hmm.
So from a transmutation point of view, if you're going to take some metal and turn it into gold, right? You would have a particular process you'd put it in. So you might start with just breaking down the base metal, right? And that's got a lot of words that go with it. I can't even think of one right now. Purgatio would be one, but it's known as the blackening. And the reason is that chemical substance is going to be broken down into its finer parts. And then that's not enough. Once you've had little filtration, it's going to be broken down even more.
Right.
And then through a series of processes, you end up with silver or gold. Just reverse that with, or not reverse it, but just plug that in for spiritual transformation. And you can see how easy it is to take a look at our lives and see a period of blackening. Anybody ever have one of those? Well, I don't know. Despair, hatred, self-loathing, whatever. I
Hmm.
mean, that's the period. Saint John's Dark Night of the Soul. And then as you move through that process, the colors change in the alchemical substance, as do our emotions, as do our primal brains,
Right.
right? Our primal brains can take a look at the alchemical process and say, Rick, I don't really know what the hell you're talking about here, but I know what it is to feel really bad.
Mm.
I know what it is to feel, uh, blue, or as I'm working through my process, I have other feelings and feelings like, well, maybe it's not so bad, and just to keep moving, or maybe you find out there's something in your life you don't like. Maybe you're an abusive husband. Maybe you're an abusive wife. Husbands are usually more common. Um, and you want to change that. That's going to be unbelievably freaking difficult. Maybe it's just you're a young teenager and you want to you want to fall in love with the boy or girl, and you're just too afraid, and all. You've got to do something to change, and going through a process can help you do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So after that long, boring setup, I came across several manuscripts that had these unbelievable images. Uh, you've seen them on the cards. And I said, I must have these. And I'm not sure how to have them. Right. So what I first did was I took them through Photoshop, cleaned them up, and I made images you could hang on your wall. So I do have uh, a great simple wall hanging that I've produced that's got 12 retorts, and I have uh, a cutout. Can't think of what you call it right now, but it's got 12 slots you can put your pictures in.
Oh.
So they're tiny, right? They're just like 3x2s, but it's 12 retorts. And just looking at it, you could see, hey, there's something going on here just based on the colors and the
Mm-hmm.
shapes, the images. So that spoke to me. And then I just started exploring, could I put these in some kind of card deck? And sure enough, I figured out I could. And then once I had the card decks, like, well, I'm going to just use this for my own, just to look at these, right? To feel them, right? If you're feeling dark, feeling blue, go to one of the dark cards, right? What do you see inside of it? And kind of use what Jung would call the active imagination. By the way, there's a book, before we're done, I have it written down over here. Marie Louise von Franz, one of probably Freud's main researcher. And she was probably at the forefront of most of the things he talked about, really, from what I could tell. But she has a book on the alchemical imagination,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a brilliant book on alchemy. It's everything that you know that we're talking about as far as alchemical, symbolic, personal transformation and relationship.
Right.
So anyway, I did these cards for myself, and then I'm like, I'll bet I could sell these things, right? And
Yeah.
so William Kiesel had Esoteric Book Conference. I don't know if you're familiar with, but it
Mm-hmm.
started back in mid 2000s, and I went to it, and I just fell in love with it, fell in love with Bill, uh, and anyway, um, I said for next year I'm going to be selling my alchemy prints. That's what I'm going to do. And so I did it. So I'm giving these decks out to people, no instructions, just here they are.
Mm-hmm.
Have fun, right?
Yeah.
Now, having gone to school with a cadre of 45 other Jungian nut jobs, we could just sit there with an image, right, for an hour and talk. Everybody could talk for an hour about the same image,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just the way we're wired. Some people aren't wired that way. I've had people look at it and say, I just, why would you waste your time on this? And all I could say is, I don't know. You have to blame my parents and those nuns. So anyway, it was a great development because I started selling these things online and
Mm-hmm.
sold them to folks. And the next year at the Esoteric Book Conference, I had people coming back that had those, and they said, Rick, this is the best set of tarot cards I have ever used.
Mm.
I'm like, hmm?
Tarot. Tarot. Yeah.
Well, of course you
Wow.
did. Yes, of
Yeah.
course. This was my design all along.
Yeah.
And other people started using them. with the what's the thing called where you the
Oh,
pendulum?
the pendulum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
using they'd lay
Hmm.
out the cards and they'd use the pendulum and come up with what what they would go down the line with.
Yeah.
So I mean, people that are involved with tarot cards and know tarot cards clearly understand the power of the image.
Right.
And a good tarot card reader is a good storyteller, has great
Hmm.
imagination, intuition. And so these cards just kind of fell into that group. I'd like to say I developed them with this scheme in mind.
Right.
Really, it's just a big accident, but I'm okay with that, you know.
Yeah.
And I love it when I get notes from people telling me how meaningful they were. And I think I may have mentioned to you, uh, sold sold some of these cards around the world, right, by practicing alchemists. And
Hmm.
they would start to send me communications. Hey, I've got this at this development in the stage of my retort, and I'm getting this color. What do you think's going on here? And I just had to say, I have no idea.
Right.
I, I'm sorry. I'm just just a flim flam man here selling cards. Um, but it was really great to find out there's this community of people around the world that
Hmm.
are interested in both tarot and alchemy and these other sorts of ways of exploring meaning in life.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's how that started. I don't know that I have had any experiences personally with my cards that were like, wow. To me, the whole thing was a wow.
Right.
And then when other people can experience something I've produced, I feel like that's one of my kids.
Hmm.
And I don't take like any ownership, like I'm responsible for that. I'm more like I'm really proud that I put this in the world and somebody else was able to have meaning from it.
Yeah. That's all we can hope for, really. That
Yes.
that feels great. Oh.
So, we may be just apes, sophisticated apes, but the fact is we're really like brilliant because we are unpredictable. We're
Mm.
I mean, on the one hand, we're totally predictable.
Right.
On the other hand, we're not, right?
Yeah.
And and to go along with life and archetypes, I mean, really, everybody wants to be redeemed. Everybody wants to be transformed in some way
Hmm.
out their life. And those are the things that are really important. And that's where alchemy jumps in. And that's where you could take somebody who's a murderer, who really has a transformation in their mind. We're not going to talk about should that murderer be punished, whatever. That's not where I'm going here.
Right.
It's just simply anybody can be redeemed.
Hmm.
Anybody can be transformed. And that is an internal process. And that is something nobody can deny you. You murder
Right.
somebody, they may take your life for doing that, but they can't, as long as you're alive, they can't take away your mind. They can't take
Mm.
away what you're able to pull out of this.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Whew. Yeah, that's definitely something very deep to think about as far as transformation and how it's available to everybody. Um, it's really interesting to think about. Yeah, I keep pulling, like, I have your deck out here, the
Okay.
camera. I got all of the cards. I got them all. I keep pulling. I'm not going to ask you to like interpret it. I wouldn't do that, but I'm just going to show the folks. It's this card. I pull it like, all the time.
Yes.
And it's, what is it? Fixatio Principato. It's, there's my terrible pronunciation.
Right.
Um, Yeah, I like thinking when I look at the cards, I like, because I don't know what these mean. Like I don't really know what these mean. But I just kind of take into account like, oh, sometimes the lid on it's covered, sometimes it's open, sometimes,
Right?
what's the process going on? There's a lot of fire in here, what does
What
that mean?
What do you think?
I
I mean,
don't,
what does
well,
it speak to you? How does it
when I,
speak?
yes. So when I look at it, I kind of laugh because it looks like the world is on fire because there's a little globe in here.
Right?
Um, and to me, if there's a lid on top, to me, that's like there's an internal process that's going on. And fire is a couple things. Fire like burns away everything. And so it's purification, but it's also like after the fire, what's left, you know. Um, so so that's something, an internal process that I'm, working out. What does that mean for me
Yeah.
personally? So yeah, so it's really cool to like, you know, really figure out and meditate on what that means for me in my particular life or situation. So it's really cool.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So fixatio principato. What
Yes.
principatio?
Yeah. I think it's Principatio. I
Yeah.
can hold it up again. Exacto. Yeah, I know it's
Yeah.
hard.
Right. So that would be uh, the first fixation or the
Mm,
first fixing. I mean, if you think of it in terms like developing black and white film, you had fixatives and things like that.
right.
It's um, it's both a chemical term, uh, but most of the retorts I have in that card are from a Rosicrucian text
Mm,
called, I want to say it's the Seven Seals. I could look that up to tell you for sure. I know the Seven Seals are in it, but it is purely a spiritual, symbolic set of retorts.
mm,
So it's really not to be taken as literal chemical. Um, but if you know kind of the processes that are part of the chemical equation, then you can have just has a little more meaning for you.
right.
I think what you've described to me is brilliant. I mean, you're just using your imagination and thinking, yeah, fire burns stuff away. That's in theory good. People in California may not appreciate it right
Right.
now.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Oh,
uh, but yeah, that's it is it's good to hear how you have looked at that for me
hmm.
because I might relate or I might see something new from that.
Yeah.
And as I've told my kids, I don't remember what you're talking about ever happening. If I don't remember it, it didn't exist. Uh, Sometimes I don't remember, but I can tell you that I have learned many things and it'll come back to me and I'll learn it again and I'll think, oh, that's not new. But it's like a remembrance. It's
Mm-hmm.
a revisitation of it, which is a
Right.
good thing. I mean, remembrance is always a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, so I was going to mention something about since I brought up that's a Rosicrucian
Mm.
text, right?
Hmm.
So there's a lot of incidentally, I just want to put out there, I am not an authority on alchemy. Now, let me also say that of all of the people I've come in contact with, I am an authority over them. Let's just put it that way. And it's not because I'm an authority. It's just I've read a lot and I've seen a lot, and so I know.
Right.
So when I hear somebody come up with comments like, "Well, there's 7 steps to alchemy, or there's 12 steps to alchemy," it's like, I don't think so.
Hmm.
I don't think so. I think you need to retake a look at this because there are multiple steps, and I mean, 12 steps, uh, nothing to do with alcoholism as far as I know. But that was a common number that was used for different alchemists,
Mm.
right? So everything in alchemy is symbolic. Everything is symbolic. So the numbers that are used are symbolic. And whenever you try to say this is what alchemy is or was, I just have to say, stop. Let's talk a little bit more about this, because the fact is, from wherever you want to say alchemy came from, the beginning of time, started with the Egyptians, with the Greeks, wherever you want to place it, it's been different and everything. But there are principles that have stayed the same.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of commonalities. And by the time of, the 16th, 17th century, mostly Christian Hermeticists got a hold of it, apologists, both Catholic and Protestant, and alchemy became a very Christian, if you will, practice.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean there weren't Arabic alchemists, because there were long before Christians. There
Right.
were Arabic alchemists. As a matter of fact, some of the most brilliant scientists that the world has known came out of the Arab world. They had a steam engine 2,000 years ago, right? I mean, the medicine that they got, or they recorded, uh, primarily was just recaptured and given as, oh, Paracelsus came up with this. Maybe not, maybe not.
Yeah.
But that's a long way of saying. The Rosicrucians, you'll hear a lot of talk about Rosicrucians.
Mm-hmm.
There are modern Rosicrucian Freemasonry sects. There's some Rosicrucian alchemical sects, one in France that I know of, simply because they've asked me for alchemical advice, and I had to tell them, you're asking the wrong guy. But nice to know you. And, anyway. Um, and as we look through history, it was in the 16th century when we first hear the term Rosicrucian. As far as I could tell from my studies, or Adam McLean's website, we'll talk about him in a second, uh, tell me that the Rosicrucians were more of a movement than they were one or two people.
Hmm.
There are people that we could point to, we could say those were Rosicrucians. Um, and a lot of them were Freemasons as well. But the movement basically came out of the 16th century, and it was a movement that uh, symbolized alchemy, right? And it became uh, more than just a spiritual formation. It also became a humanistic or
Hmm.
humanist formulation, and really tied into what was happening with the Royal Society in the early 17th century with Francis Bacon, who was just a brilliant polymath and was adored by the Royal Society. We could talk about him for days. Um, but when we talk about Rosicrucians, like I said, I'm more comfortable talking about it as a movement that developed and had unbelievable influence in both the Royal Society and the founding of Freemasonry,
Mm-hmm.
which of course Freemasons were part of the Royal Society. I mean, it's like it's this web that's all tangled up together, um, but brilliantly. And I'm a Freemason. Don't hate me. Um, you don't rule the world. We can't even agree on what pizza to order. I
Right.
I guarantee you that. Um,
Yeah.
but I know early on, and I knew about alchemy before I knew anything really about Freemasonry. And I was telling some of the brothers, hey, this you've got alchemical imagery in the rites here and things. And they're like, no, we don't. I go, oh, yeah, actually, I think you do. In the Scottish Rite, for those who want to go out and take a look, uh, as you read through the 32 degrees, there's actually multiple allusions to the alchemical process, right? So again, they're using it very strongly as this is going to make better people.
Mm,
And that was really what, for me, one of the shining lights coming out of the Renaissance periods that I saw. People wanted to be better. They didn't want to have to kill each other just because you believed in a different way about God,
hmm.
um, or the Pope, or whatever, right?
Right.
They just were tired, absolutely tired of it. That was part of the whole Royal Society's getting together. Is like, you guys go off and fight in the corner there, right? We want to work on scientific development and you know how to make people better, how to make society better.
Mm-hmm.
All right, sermon number 376 ended.
Yeah, I like thinking about that too, about the Enlightenment in that sense, because I think most people think, oh, the Enlightenment was about art and, writing. And yes, yeah, for sure. But at the core of it, I like thinking about like, no, we actually want to be better people and have better societies. So we need a little more of that, I think. Or,
Absolutely,
yeah.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, if you look at history, like look at the Renaissance period, the de Medicis, who were
Mm,
absolutely ruthless,
right.
right?
Yeah.
You think we have ruthless people today? Yeah, they're it's child's play. I would
Right.
sooner slit your throat and toss you in the drink than go off and have a nice lunch.
Right.
Uh, but they financed a lot of the wonderful works of art that we got through, the Michelangelo. Well, maybe not Michelangelo. He didn't seem to get a lot of money, but all of those people greatly benefited from that. And then, of course, as humans, we're able to look back on the art and be like, wow,
Yeah.
this is really fantastic. Um, and of course, we saw that with the Rockefellers. They came through. They literally
Right.
killed people to to get things done,
Right.
and formed a nice little, you know, uh, beneficial philosophical society and set up museums and everything. So it's like
Hmm.
it's mixed.
Right.
Um, and I hate to keep drawing the analogy between black and white.
Hmm.
We just can't think in terms of very many things in terms of black and white
Right.
because it's just such a mixed, crazy world.
Hmm.
Wherever you're going to point the finger at, it's pointing back at you,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
it's going to be touching one of your golden idols, sacred cows.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
So,
that's so hard for even on an individual basis.
yeah.
But that's the work. That's what we got to do.
True. True.
And I think you did you want to mention Adam? I can't remember the last name, his uh
Yes.
alchemical website?
Adam McLean.
Adam McLean. Yes.
And I think his website, maybe I have it written here. I think it's called Alchemy Website,
Perfect.
is what it's called. And I do have it written down, but I'll be damned if I can find it right now.
Well, that's okay.
Um, yeah, so Adam is the man. He is the master. And he will also tell you he's not
Right.
complete. But yeah, he was pulling information out back in the 60s and 70s when the internet didn't exist. when in
Wow.
order to get these alchemical texts, you had to go to, one of the university libraries and, you know, put on some gloves and talk to people to get copies and things like that.
Wow.
Absolute pioneer in modern Western esotericistic literature, uh,
Hmm.
and just a really, I think he's a great guy. I mean, he's a cranky old Scot, is what he is. But as I get older, these cranky guys just seem more lovable to me. I don't know what that is, but he's done a tremendous service for us. And if you have any alchemy ideas, or need research, he's at least got something about it. I guarantee.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Cool.
incredible. His website is, I don't know how many terabytes of information. It's huge.
Wow.
But he's talked about, when I go, I don't know what's going to happen
Oh
with this.
no.
I'm thinking like, well, I hope somebody does something with it.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, we got to figure that out, everybody.
Just a treasure. Yeah,
Yes.
absolute treasure.
That's so awesome
Um,
that exists.
in the Northwest here, um, I think I mentioned Robert Bartlett
Hmm.
lives up in Marysville. Is a
Spagyrics.
only I could talk, right? Spagyricist, right? And that is a branch of alchemy that primarily is medicinal in nature.
Hmm.
So finding lots of things. I have other folks I know that are involved in that as well, but it's a very specific branch of alchemy.
Hmm.
But Robert's a very humble guy. I think he's very super smart,
Mm.
and he knows what's going on. I think he's also a works as a chemist,
Oh,
so
wow.
he provides advice for firms like Boeing on what kind of materials can be used. Da, 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 da. Super smart, super humble. He has classes all the time,
Hmm.
and if anybody's interested in doing that, I'd say look him up. Well
Yeah.
worth your time. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm always fascinated with spagyrics. It seems like I I have a lot of respect for it, but I'm like, I don't know if I could do it. But I
Good.
think it's awesome.
You could. By the way,
Yeah.
several of my art prints are in Robert's laboratory.
Really? Oh, that's so cool.
And he also has a deck of my cards.
Of course he does.
And what's funny is when he bought them, I had no idea who he was, right? And again, he's just very unassuming, came up,
Hmm.
so he bought this deck and I'm like, oh, cool, another sales, right?
Right.
So he went off and one of my friends came over and said, do you know who that is? And I'm like, no. So then they told me, and it's like, oh gosh, did I say anything stupid? I mean, more stupid than normal.
Right.
Uh, I don't think
That's
I,
so cool.
yeah. There was, boy, time is flying by so fast, but I want to say
Mhm.
somewhere between 2008 and 2013, there was actually an alchemist conference or convention or whatever
Wow.
held in a secret place up in uh, Redmond, the Venusian. Yeah, I think it's the Venusian Church.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've heard about it, but anyway, it's a hideaway place when you drive up to get to go down the hill to it. It's got all sorts of signs that say, if you're not welcome here, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Whoa.
But you get down to the bottom of it and you see what they have around. They built a full stone circle. They've got a living womb, if you will, for
Wow.
people to go through transformations. They have yeah, a little Greek temple set up. Um, it's a really wild place, but it was,
Whoa.
it was absolutely great to spend this weekend with all these different folks related to alchemy, and I don't know, just it's just so fun to be part of something like that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't there as alchemical authority. I was there simply as I got some wares to sell and I like them. So,
Uh-huh.
but amazing stuff. There's a lot of stuff here in the Northwest that is hidden treasures. And unfortunately, I think COVID has helped kind of dampen that down. We need to get,
Hmm.
we need to resurrect this stuff, right?
Yeah,
We need to
I
get
think
more
so.
people getting excited about alchemy
Yes, everybody. Let's get excited about alchemy.
or whatever.
Yes, because all that stuff is like sounds awesome. Those are my favorite places to visit and go to. So that's yeah, we need more of that open, especially around where I live, where we live. That'd be
Yes.
amazing. Wow, thanks, Rick. Wow, we've gone through so many things. I think the very last thing, and I know this could be like a whole discussion in of itself, but I did want to mention because you talked about dreams. Um, and so my own thinking on dreams, because I was really resistant to recording my dreams, like writing them down, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they just seem sort of dumb, right? Like, oh, in the dream I went to the grocery store and I met this, or whatever.
Yes.
Um, but I do now understand because I've been doing it now for 4 or 5 years. When I do recall them, I do write them down. And the thing that I have found doing that is there is a language inside of me that is starting to appear, and it's the language of symbols. I'm sure you're very aware.
Yes.
um, and those symbols are very internal, like they mean something to me. I don't like, I think a lot of times when people explain dreams to other people, that's why other people are like, what?
Yeah.
Is because the internal symbols mean a lot to you. But when you start writing them down, then it's like, oh, I dream a lot about being in other people's houses. And what does that mean? Like, I meet these type of individuals all the time. What is that, So what can you tell us about dreams that you wanted to share?
Wow. There's a lot.
Yeah.
Let me just try to cut through all the morass here. Marie Louise von Franz, who I mentioned on
Hmm.
alchemy, has written a couple books on dreams. You need to get them.
Okay.
She's also written at least one book on fairy tales, if not more. Dreams, fairy tales, the symbolic world, it's all the same.
Mm.
It's all the same. Um, really great stuff. There's Robert Bosniak has a book called A Little Course on Dreams.
Mm.
And here's the best part for those who don't like to read a lot of books. It's only like 30 or 40 pages long.
Wow.
And in it, he talks about the alchemical process and he uses the colors associated with alchemy. So
Mm.
the black, the white, the yellow, the reds. Um, a great little book, easy read. Um, but Marie Louise von Franz is the woman. She was the master, and I've there's a Marie von Franz Institute in Switzerland also,
Oh, wow.
and the guy that was my thesis advisor uh, at Pacifica graduated from her school, and he chose it over the Jungian Institute. Uh, he believes that, or they believe that she had the true Jungian calling as opposed to the Institute. I don't know. I don't begin to understand such things. I do know that Jung was known to have said, uh, as he was getting older and, he had all these Jungians popping up. He said, "Thank God I'm Jung and not a Jungian. I don't think I can keep up with these people."
Great.
And you'll find that when you talk about archetypes, especially, Jung never really fully developed exactly what he meant. So you
Mm,
got all these people with, I've got the inside scoop, the inside source. Me, I'm simple. It's like, I just kind of get it. All right. There's values that are common to everybody. Call
right.
them something else, right? Call them the values of the sophisticated primates, whatever, whatever it is. So I started to see a therapist. I don't know. It could have been 25, 30 years ago. In any case, the first day I saw the therapist, who was Jungian oriented, I didn't know that at the time.
Mm.
I said, or she said, "You ever dream?" I'm like, "That's an odd question. Kind of personal, really, lady."
Yeah.
So I said, "Well, yeah, I do." Like, do you have any recurring dreams? I'm like, "Wow, she's psychic. This woman is psychic."
Yeah.
Um, and I told her a recurring dream that I had.
Hmm.
And she unfolded it for me like in a matter of minutes that blew my mind,
Wow.
blew my mind. And she's, she doesn't really like to be mentioned, but I'd say that that's another person who really is very formative in, some of the thinking in my last 25 years here or so.
Hmm.
But my advice would be if you're really interested in dreams, you should and you want to work on interpreting them, you should work with a Jungian based therapist.
Mm.
And here's my reason for it. Number one, I think they just have the uh, best interpretations for interpreting both you and what's going on with you with your dream.
Hmm.
Um, uh, the other reason is when you get into dreams and visions and a lot of these things, you could go internal and you can just become stark raving mad, right? Now, this is the guy that when he was first introduced to uh, working with dreams as a therapist said, oh, please, what are you guys talking about here? They're just dreams, right? Uh, and I've since changed my mind on that to see some people that they go too far inwards.
Mm.
We're not meant to only go inward. We need to go outward too. We need to be part of a community. So for that reason, I would suggest being being part of a Jungian, at least a Jungian group that can help guide you and keep you from going off the rails. I know it
Mm.
sounds weird. This really sounds weird what I'm saying. That's true. I
Yeah.
swear it. There's a book that I would recommend by Catherine Linskog, and I believe it's called The Gift of Dreams.
Mm.
This book is written from a Christian perspective, right? I mean, it's like heavily laden with
Right.
Christian stuff, but she gives a history of dreams that is second to none. And she'll tell you about more authors that wrote their books based on the dreams they had or life paths that people have taken.
Hmm.
Brilliant book. If you're into dreams, that's a book you ought to have on your bookshelf for sure. There's a local film, not a local film, but a local conductor for, I don't know, I can't remember if it's a Seattle Philharmonic or what, but this guy produced a film. When he was diagnosed with cancer,
Mm.
he started dreaming of this dog. This dog would teach him things. And so he started painting his dreams with this dog. And damn, I'm going to have to look the name of this film up because people will look for it and they'll be like, I can't find it. I will get it for you. I can't think of
Yes.
the name of it, but his wife, he was thinking of his wife when he had this because he knew he was dying, and he said,
Yeah.
I'm going to turn this into a film, my wife could sell it and she can live, and I won't have to worry about her.
Hmm.
And I've had the privilege of meeting her, having lunch, and a wonderful woman. Um, but this film it will just absolutely blow your mind.
Wow.
Guaranteed.
Ah, well,
Damn it!
yeah.
Why can't I think of the name of
Oh,
that film?
well, no worries. Like if you do, I'll also look and see if I can find it. But if you do remember, you can send it to me and I'll put it in the notes for sure
I
so
will.
that people have it. So many great recommendations. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like so many new books that I have to buy, but that's okay. I mean, come on. Um, well, thank you, Rick. Usually, I know you're kind of like you kind of do your own thing. I usually ask if there's any sort of, events or projects coming up that you want to let us to know about. But
Sure.
yeah.
Well, I have two projects in the works right now.
Hmm.
Actually, I think I have three.
Wow.
One is I'm paying somebody to redo my website,
Oh,
which is going to primarily be selling books, but we're going to have some other juicy stuff in there, I hope.
oh, cool.
Hopefully, I don't screw it up. That's why I paid somebody.
Right.
And I told her, I said, you got to keep me from screwing this up.
Right.
Um, so that I'm hoping that'll be out in March,
Cool.
that website. And it's simply archetypalartworks.com.
Hmm.
And
Nice.
you can go there now and there's something, but it's lame.
Hmm.
It's
Okay.
just um and then I'm working on I want to have some little sessions, 2 to 3 hours, where people can come to learn to read Greek.
Ooh.
And I can provide tools. You can get them off the internet for free.
Yeah.
Where if you're interested in reading Greek, we could get you up and reading Greek. You don't have to be a Greek scholar. There will be the use of Greek interlinears that have the Greek and English right together. But to learn it is so simple. Uh, I think it's simple anyway. And if you get into the Greek language, which I highly recommend, you will be able to do things like let's say make it easy. New Testament, I say easy because the New Testament's written in what's called Koine Greek,
Hmm.
which is a common Greek, slightly dumbed down from classical, what we know as classical Greek. But uh, say you're interested in light, go to the book of the Gospel of John and just start looking for the word light. And the Greek word is photos, phos, and see where is light used?
Hmm.
Why is it used this way? You don't have to be a Greek scholar to do this. You don't have to depend on a pastor to figure it out for you. You can simply look at it
Hmm.
and see what's this all about. I mean, light, of course, is a word that's super powerful in all the mysteries, all religions. But to see it firsthand and experience it, to me, it's just fun and it's fun. All right. Um, and then another thing I'm working on a short film.
Ooh.
Right? When I say short, I mean like 5 to 10 minutes long, but
Yeah.
it'll be an alchemical process as seen through art and music that I've written for it.
Wow.
So, could be a big bust, but it's all right. I mean, it's one of these things that something inside says I have to do it, so I have to do it.
Yeah.
And it may be just to say, wow, this guy should not make films. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Some of the music is really good, though, I promise.
Oh, how cool.
My opinion.
Yes. Oh, wow. You are so busy. Goodness. Like those are three really big projects. I'm very excited to learn more about your film and these Greek classes. Because generally when you get into sort of the at least the Western mysteries, like you're kind of told you should learn Hebrew or Greek
Yes.
and probably Latin.
Yes. It's true.
Yeah.
But I could bring those though. I could bring those in a simple, accessible way.
Yeah. So cool. Oh, well, thank you, Rick. Is there, let's see. So should people go to Archetypal Artworks to kind of find you if they want to ask you any questions, or where would you direct them?
Um, I'm trying to remember if on the current iteration it has a address.
Oh,
You know, they can send me an email at rick at
mm,
archetypalartworks.com
okay.
and be happy to, field whatever questions.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So we'll have all your links, and I'll also put your email in the show notes so folks know to reach out to you. Um, let's see. Oh, and I know I always have, after everybody has shared all these wonderful words of wisdom, I ask for more words of wisdom to leave the audience with. So, is there any sort of last words that you'd like to leave us with today?
Well, specifically for alchemy, I would say if you're interested in pursuing alchemy, there's a book called The Chemical Choir. I want to say it's Walter Piggott. Anyway, The
Hmm.
Chemical Choir, there's only one book by him, and that has a great history of it. It takes you into Chinese alchemy, uh, all sorts of alchemical periods of time in a very scholarly yet I found it readable fashion. Um, Marie Louise von Franz's book on alchemy, and I believe it's called Active Imagination and Alchemy.
Hmm.
Brilliant, brilliant stuff. Robert Bosniak's book on little dreams, on little course on dreams is what it's called. And boy, I mean, I could give you book recommendations all day long,
Oh, yeah.
but I would just, I would say anybody who is interested in seeking to do so, I would say try to temper yourself. The hardest thing when you learn something new is you want to waterboard everybody with it, particularly like something like Greek or Hebrew.
Right.
When someone learns it, I'm not speaking about myself. I'm talking about other people. Um, yeah,
Mhm.
they they just are all of a sudden they've had one lesson in 20 vocabulary words and they're ready to reinterpret the Bible or rewrite Homer. Um, I am not an authority on Greek or Hebrew, though I should with the education I've had. But I know enough at this point now that you can still enjoy it without having to be tested on it, right?
Right.
So it's really great stuff. But yeah, just be loose, seek, you will find, you will find. And
Oh,
that doesn't always mean happy endings or no trips and traps, but
right.
life's as good as you make it, truly. And if you got people to help you along the way, how fantastic is that?
Oh, ah,
Yeah.
very, I love it. Ah, those are such great words of wisdom to leave us with. Ah, well, thank you, Rick. I'm so happy you gave us so much of your time and you're willing to chat. And I know people are going to get so much out of this, especially with all the wonderful book recommendations and just your story. So thank you.
No, my pleasure. And thank you for doing what you do. I mean, keeping a positive podcast out there is just great, really great. So thank you.
To learn more about the Casual Temple podcast, please visit our website, casualtemple.com. There's a Casual Temple YouTube channel, and you can follow me on Instagram with username @MerilyDuffy or @Casual Temple. Please be sure to leave a review and share this episode with the people in your life who would enjoy this content. Do check out the other episodes of the Casual Temple podcast on your preferred podcast app, and thank you so much for listening.